Lalo and I have been doing this for a while and have enjoyed all the different guests that we've had. And we have what I think coming up today is somebody that we both have a lot of respect for, but we have a lot of respect for their family. And this is one of those, it's kind of like a legacy going on further, I think, that is really, really cool. Some good folks, good family. But anyway, with today's challenges, I guess we also are faced with some things like, how can you make it? What should you do? Is this a tough industry to get into? And the do's and don'ts and things of that nature, with so many people, graduating, looking for jobs or looking for careers and trying to figure out things. So, I mean, Lalo, this is more kind of along your lines of what you've seen and trying to help people become proficient in different skill sets and knowledge sets, right?
Yeah. And I guess for us here at Global Training Center, the thing is that we usually get those folks that are already in the industry. They've been in it for some years. Of course, we do get the folks that are starting off, but because they're not in the industry, they kind of have a, they probably don't know of us, and they don't know how to come or to come to us for training. As I prepared for this episode, I thought to myself, this is going to be a good opportunity for us to show the world, or our audience anyway, hopefully the world, right? They all tune
Yeah.
in, but the audience, show them how younger folks, and I'm talking about, like, when I'm talking about someone that's getting into the industry, there's all phases of life. We see veterans getting out of the military, displaced workers that are getting into the trade and logistics, but they're older. They're probably not in their 20s anymore. They're, maybe in their 30s or maybe early 40s or whatever, and they're introduced into trade. But when in this case, this episode, we're going to hit a lot on literally the younger generation, as Anik likes to always talk about, the Gen Z, that the group where, like, my kids fall in, and the early 20s, mid 20s, where they graduate from college and they're looking for a career, and or they might have realized they took classes in international business, or they took classes in supply chain, or gosh, I don't know. There's not that many other sectors that our guest, Madison Lackey, will probably correct me. We'll figure out what she majored on and everything. But the thing is that, what's next? You know what I mean? And I feel like, and I already mentioned Madison here, I think she's a good example as to how and where to follow that route to begin. She obviously came from a family of trade professionals. Her mom and her dad formerly started and owned
Customs
the
info.
software company, Customs Info. So y'all will already know about that. We had an episode with all three of them previously, so you might want to listen to that. It was a fun episode, talking and reminiscing. And but Madison, thank you for joining us here again, and just tackling this task and catching up with you. It's been a couple of years since I first saw you and met you, when you were fresh out of your, I guess, broker exam that you passed it. And so, so happy to have you back on and just kind of catch up and see how you've been doing, kind of like a follow up.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. Yeah, so since we met, I started a new company. I'm now a trade compliance consultant at Blue Tiger International. And as you said, it's been such an interesting time to get into the trade compliance space, especially as someone who just started, because it's so chaotic right now. And, I never saw maybe I did for a year, but like the normal side of trade compliance. I got into this as the recent administration got in as well, and it has just been so crazy, but I'm actually very grateful, because I think that if I can understand everything that's going on right now and keep up, that all the other years to come are going to be much easier, or navigating if there's chaos ensuing again, right? So
Yeah.
it's been
Well, I would think that some new folks, that, let's say someone got in the last year of Biden, right? They they thought, I mean, kind of like that was your case, and that was trade as how trade was, I guess, normally viewed, and then all of a sudden Trump comes in, and you're like, what the heck is going on? Everything
Turned
changed.
everything upside
Yeah,
down.
exactly.
right.
But someone who started, like, let's say in mid 2025, they were already in the middle of it. So they didn't know how it was before, how it is now. You got to see both. But not only that, but you also grew up with that. Of course, seeing your parents going through trade and everything. So you had a little bit of, I'm not gonna say you knew about trade. I doubt, like I know my kids, they could care less what the heck I did, right? They're like, oh, he's going to a conference. Oh, he's talking about trade, and you know what I mean? But it's not bad. I'm just saying, it's just not, it wasn't in their interest. But at least you knew a little bit of what it was before and how it is now. So I can imagine how that just like went nuts for you on having to not figure out, but having to acclimate to that new way of doing. And there was a point where everybody's like, oh, it's gonna go away, don't worry. But
Back
no,
to normal,
that's been
right?
the new normal. Yeah.
Yeah. I hear people all the time, oh, I can't wait till it goes back to normal. I'm like, I think this is our normal now. It's not going back. Maybe it'll calm down, but
Yeah. Well, what people forget is that they forget that we love money. They see that money coming in from
yep,
tariffs, and it's going to be no matter who the next president is, it's going to be very hard to try to go back and not get that money anymore. You know what I mean? So,
completely
but
agree.
anyway,
They're not gonna lose that money.
no.
Well, and there also, I think, as we were talking off camera, there is the opportunity where people are investigating ways to either avoid duties and taxes, and especially if they are buying in bulk, importing it in, and then turn around selling it internationally, which is an ideal situation for a foreign trade zone or FTZ. That's just one element. I mean, there's multiple instruments here. The other thing is tax avoidance, duty avoidance, things of that nature that are legal to do to try and engineer your process, but never to circumvent it, obviously. So in that process, it's like you've got to have people that can, I guess, go through information and look at it. You just said it. If you can keep up with everything that's going on and how it applies to your clients, then you can help them and come alongside them, because it is overwhelming. And I guarantee I would hate to be starting my career in the midst of this, because it would take a whole lot of energy right now to handle that. So that's a young person's game in a sense.
Yeah, it has been very confusing because coming out of the broker's exam, I learned like the basics, and they teach you just the basics. Like they're not teaching you
Right.
how to operate in every single day. And like right after I got my broker's license, it was, okay, well, I have no idea what to do because nothing that I learned of the broker's license actually applies. Like when we were talking to clients or customers and applying the new HTS codes and the stacking tariffs, right? So it was very interesting. And I think that this industry is so interesting right now because, like I know what we're going to talk about, is more and more people are retiring and customs brokers are retiring every single day. And recently, the recent administration is pushing more from CBP to enforcement, and they're funneling more money into CBP. And now with AI, like, they don't need someone sitting at a desk going through, oh, this HTS code changed from this to this, and it was one way for the last 10 years, right? So there's going to be so much more scrutiny with CBP on our importers and exporters, and there's less and less people coming into the industry and more people retiring. So there's going to be this major gap that's happening right now. So it's such an interesting time to be in the space, and I'm curious what's going to happen.
Well, I will say that in today's world, I mean, up to this point, I guess, or up to a few years ago, if there was a problem, there were mechanisms to allow you to react, if you will, and fix a problem as it went through. Now there's so much that's being pushed so much more towards the front end and whatnot. I would say, I don't know, people hardly hear about it anymore, but it's the Sarbanes-Oxley initiative and laws basically says make sure that every transaction that you initiate, whether it's accounting, sales, posting something online, whatever, the Sarbanes-Oxley intent is to make sure that you cross your T's, dot your I's, and make sure it's accurate and right. Well, if you took that approach and applied it into the supply chain, there's a lot of things where people say, oh, well, I don't have all the information right now, we'll just kind of let it go. Or yeah, I kind of vetted that company, that vendor, and it's just, I'll just give them the basic information and then come to find out there's a whole, more problems in that. You can't just cut corners anymore. You've really got to build a solid foundation and do your job right from the very beginning. And it's not just compliance, it's interacting with so many different groups within a company to get them all on board. That's not an easy task to try, and it's like you're herding cats trying to get them to pull together. And in that, it's an interesting time, as you just mentioned. So from your perspective, I mean, there's never a dull moment, is there?
No, no, not at all.
And
I would imagine you're having the types of things you're coming across, though. The approach is you've got to do some research on the different problems you encounter to find out, you know, if CBP is stopping something or looking at something or an agency's questioning something in the midst of what you're doing. The research skills that you've had to, I guess, develop in college and and even doing the brokerage exam, you've got to. Part of that brokerage exam is finding out, do you have the skills to find out where that information is in the regs, right? And you employ
Yeah,
that part you're going to employ and apply every day.
100%. Yeah, all the brokerage exam is can you find the accurate information? And
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely something that I'm applying every single day. Luckily, I have a good team who guides me, but yeah, being able to pick apart all the executive orders and what actually needs to apply it's very difficult. And there's so many nuances and within it. And you're right, like it's coming at us so fast that companies aren't having their time to cross the T's and dot the I's, right? So having a team that can understand and break down all this information very quickly and accurately is so crucial, which I think goes back to if you're coming into the industry, getting your broker's license can be so helpful. Even if you don't want to be a broker, I don't want to be a broker. I don't want to push paper and do entries, but it's given me such a great base layer of knowledge coming into the industry. And when like people are talking about the bonds, or the bonded warehouses, or the foreign trade zones, or how to apply an HTS code or a duty, I just have that base knowledge. I don't need to really dive into it because I understand, and then you can dive into the new stuff. So that's a recommendation that I would have is even if you're not interested in becoming a broker, even your CCS is one of the best things that you can do.
When you're going out with your friends and whatnot in your roundtable discussion and you start talking about maybe current affairs, obviously we've got the situation with the Iran war, or you have some other scenario where China is threatening with the geopolitical stuff, threatening things with Taiwan, or you have the South American situation or the Panama Canal, or different supply chains that get interrupted. Mm, any hostilities with the U.S. right now, and or Canada's upset with the U.S. or U.S. with them, or whatever the case may be. In those kinds of conversations, if you will, talking around the table with your friends and all, is there a greater interest in how to, I guess, navigate in the winds of supply chain with them and in the industry, or is it still the deer in the headlight look kind of thing that you have to deal with?
That's a funny question actually. I think before a couple years ago, it was definitely deer in the headlights, but recently now that it's on the news and tariffs are a big deal, like,
Mhm.
I it's less of deer in headlights because I can apply it to what's happening today and with the administration, right? And because everyone's talking about it, and now like my friends' clothes are going up in price because the tariffs, right?
Mhm.
That matters. That's
Mhm.
applicable to them. Before it was just
Mhm.
right over their head. So I think yeah, a little bit. It's starting to be more of a discussion, and people understand a bit more about what I do because they can apply it to what they're hearing and to what they're actually having to pay for. But I think it does. They're still like, well, I wouldn't want anything to do with that kind of look. So
I mean, it's one of those things where, again, there's some complexity in the things that we deal with and we see in the supply chain, but it's also one of those things that's pretty cool that, I mean, this isn't an easy job. This isn't something where you just sit back and say, "Oh, let me do a few things and I collect my paycheck. This is something that you really have to intellectually look through and do some problem solving and research to see the cause and effect and all that kind of stuff, or look to see about regulations to see, can I import this in appropriately or export it to certain countries without getting myself into trouble. That takes some, if you will, energy and brain power to get through that, doesn't it?
Hmm.
And
So go ahead,
no, I
Lalo.
was going to say real quick. I mean, you're talking about your friends and like all that information, and like how you're now a little more, or at least the topic of your whatever it is you do 9 to 5 is probably now more relevant to them, or they might be have more interest. But I had talked about earlier, and you did too. You opened up the door about retirement and folks
Mhm.
retiring. But I guess that career path that you took, can you like explain a little bit of like, I know you went to Cal Poly, and the only reason I know that is because, of course, my kids went there too. So that I always remember. I don't know. It's funny how there's a lot of things that that intersect in. I'm not gonna say in
People's
our lives
lives.
because we haven't really
Yeah.
been in our lives, but like that cross paths that way. And both my kids went to Cal Poly as did you, but I don't remember it there being a course. I mean, they emphasize a lot on agriculture and engineering there, and the
Yes.
architect too. They're a big architect school. So those three. It's space too. In fact, I've heard of some astronauts that are in all these test pilots and everything
Mhm.
that are from Cal
Yeah, the
Poly. So
last
anyway,
astronaut was a Cal Poly grad.
yeah, yeah, exactly. The one that went and they flew around the moon. He
Hmm.
was one of them. He was one of them from Cal Poly grad. So anyway, besides that, what did you major in? How did you decide? Okay, this is actually a path for me, or was that actually an accident? Like moving into trade because maybe you were not what you majored in was not something you were going to do anyway. So or whatever.
Yeah, so I actually majored in agriculture business, which actually there's a lot of crossovers because
Mhm.
these companies are dealing with perishables and all the goods coming across the border, and getting shipped to and from Mexico and Canada. So I did end up talking about it a lot. It's not initially what I wanted to do, but once I took a couple classes, I think I took it was an international trade class, but and marketing for agriculture. And in that class, I was like, "Oh, I know what they're talking about," and I wasn't interested in it in high school or college, and it's not what I wanted to do. But once I got into that and it did click for me, I realized that I wanted to see international trade and if I liked it. So after graduating, I got a job at a big firm and worked there for about a year and a half. It was good. I also got my broker's license while I was there. And for anyone who's coming into their career, definitely getting all the certifications that you can, doing all the webinars, and just learning as much as you can outside of just your job. I I would recommend that your job is not your only resume builder, but you're also getting certifications outside of that because that's what allowed me to eventually leave that firm and get a different job that I really enjoy. So, and there's so much to learn in the industry. Sorry. So all the webinars and certifications that you can get helped leverage me to get my next job. And I I want to reverse a little bit because I think I did jump the gun a little bit getting into my job. There's a lot of pressure, especially at Cal Poly, to get a job right out the gate. You
Yes,
have to pick what you
yes.
want to do, and that's where you're going to be for the next 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, whatever it is. And I wish I would have taken a little bit more time to slow down and pick where I want to go, because that's what I ended up doing after I left. The last job that I had is I took a couple of months to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to be in the industry, but I was like, I need to figure out what I liked and what I hated about my last job. And I ended up quitting without having a job lined up. I had just gotten my broker's license, and everyone told me, do not do that. Do not do that. My dad was pissed. Do not quit your job without having another job lined up.
I bet Ron was going, "You did what?"
I said,
and
I need to
think
do
that's
that.
when I met you, though, right? That's when I met you,
Yes.
and your mom and I were talking about that. You were not there with us, but your mom and I were talking about that, saying I think she was also like, she quit her job, but she's here, she's hustling, and so
And I wouldn't have found my new job if I hadn't taken the space to take a couple months. You know, I went to ICPA and I brought 50 resumes. I pitched myself to every booth. I got tons of interviews off of that. I got a couple job offers, which was the one that I ended up taking. And that worked the best for me because I was able to slow down, figure out what was right for me. And that was another thing coming out the gate is I think that a lot of younger people when they're interviewing, they're just like, I just want this job offer. Like it's good money, it's a good job, whatever it is. But I think that allowed me to sit back and do I want to work for you? You know, do I like you? Right. And I
Right.
think that getting out of college, there's so much angst about just getting a job that you forget that. So
Well, to your point, I got to say this. I can remember interviewing some college grads that, whether it was their bachelor, I've interviewed several that were completing their masters, and it was like they were really wanting, to get a job offer, but also it was really unrealistic for what I encountered, where their expectations were, I want the 6-figure salary offer right off the bat, and I want, all these different things. And I'm like, with all due respect, you've got your education. You have zero experience. Several of the masters went from bachelor's straight into the masters. And then it's like, well, yeah, you've got the book knowledge in a sense, but do you really know how to apply that knowledge into a business environment? And I have seen it in several situations where there have been people hired and they really didn't understand how business functioned. And to your point, I mean, the broker's exam teaches you, basically you have to get in, get the basics. You learn the language, or a lot of the language, not all of it, and all of that. But then the other scenario here is, as you're getting in, you got to figure out the real life of day in and day out of business. So as you're looking through this, what would you tell yourself when you were a freshman in college, going back in time and saying, what would you do different to
when
maybe
looking for a job,
looking for a job, going through your career? I mean, in college, basically your first 2 years traditionally are going to be your basic fundamentals, right? Basic requirements. And usually it's in year 3 that you're having to narrow, oh, yep, this is what I'm going to major in. But even in that, it's, you take your best shot on some of that. What would you do, or what would you suggest to yourself back then and going, I should be looking at programs. What is it I like to do? What is it I hate to do? What is it, what's the industry, or what? I mean, what kind of research? So, other people your age or that are in college about to come out or whatever, what would you suggest that they start looking at before they finally graduate and hit the business market?
yeah, it's a great question. There's so many aspects of that. But I think the most important one for me is figuring out, well, yeah, what do you want to do? What do you not want to do? And what kind of company do you want to work for? You know, I thought that I wanted to work for a really big company. And it turns out I never want to work for a big company again. And all respect to them, but I just, it's not great for me. I need to be hand, I think with a smaller company, you get to wear a lot of hats, which is so important. It's not just like, okay, here's busy work, right? It's no, we're small. We need to get this stuff done. Here's actual work with real consequences. And the real consequences are when I started learning. When I have like, it's not just my boss who just like needs this done, right? It's a real client, it's a real situation scenario. And that's when you get really good at your job because it has to be done well and done quickly, right? So I think when looking for a job, asking questions like, how quickly am I going to gain responsibility? Or, what is kind of the day-to-day task that I'm actually going to be doing right off the bat? And like, what's the timeline for that? Are you going to be training me for 6 months or a year before I get real work? Because you don't want to spend the first 2 years of your job just at a company that isn't going to give you real work and just wants to train you, right? So I think that's the biggest thing is what is a job going to look like for you? And what do they need out of you, really? Do they just need to hire another person, or do they absolutely need someone to get the job done and get it done well? And I think that's I wish every single manager knew, don't give your employees busy work. It is a waste of their time and your time. Like, give them something real, and either they can do it or they can't, and you can train them or you can move on. But just don't waste people's time.
I like the way
Yeah.
you're saying that because us as a small company are exactly the same way. It's like everybody wears all these hats, and it's like you said, busy work is busy work, but everybody's actually doing things that they have to be accountable for and all that. But I also like earlier you said that about being accountable, and off camera we were talking about folks retiring, how younger generations need to step up to replace and kind of almost consume and soak in all that knowledge that they have, because a lot of it you can't find in books. You can't find in
No.
manuals, or oh, here's a manual, this is what I did. So maybe there's a lot of hints in there, but it's like there's this vendor that this is the way you deal with him, and this is the way you talk to them. This is how you
Mhm.
get that knowledge. We talked about CBP folks retiring and all that. Andy, you had the question, how did you say we should I mean, we should approach it? I mean, it's very good way of approaching this and talking about the retiring generation.
Well, yeah, it's like, and what we were talking about is there are so many folks within CBP that a lot of, people that have had, been in the industry a long time, their contacts have retired. And so there's this new group of CBP officers, as well as in other agencies as well. That was redundant. Anyway, there with these new folks that are coming in, they themselves are not seasoned, so they're not as knowledgeable. They have gone through customs university, if you will. They have gone through different things, and now all of a sudden they've assumed some roles. Just like Madison, what you were saying is you're stepping into some of these things, and they're learning. You know what? This part of customs I may not like, or this part of customs I don't know what I'm doing. I'm here, but okay. They understand the basics, and so the private sector needs to be able to approach this, not just complain about it. Oh, these people don't know what they're doing and all. It's frustrating. Is be able to come alongside, develop the relationships. I can't emphasize that enough. Is develop the relationships with the agencies that you're dealing with. They're people just like we are. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. And you go along and see if you can't help, I guess, the approach would be, what can you do to help them get through that learning curve faster or quickly, and make it a win-win scenario, rather than saying you're so stupid you don't know what you're doing or whatever, and then you have this adversarial relationship. Would you, Madison, I mean, are you seeing that, and would you agree with that kind of approach?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, in the recent administration, there was a lot of turnover with CBP officers on top of a lot of officers retiring, right? And just people
Mm-hmm.
in the industry. I think what I've seen, the one of the most beneficial is all the conferences. I attend NAFTZ, which a lot of officers come to, and
Mm-hmm.
Foreign Trade Zone Board employees used to come to. They haven't, they didn't show up last year, which was interesting. But being at those conferences and having those networking connections, as we know, the industry of trade compliance is already so small, but you learn so much from the webinars and actually talking to the importers and people in this scenario, people who have foreign trade zones. And it's great that officers show up because they're learning from you, believe it or not, and you're learning from them. We recently had a situation where we had to walk through how to do something with the CBP officer that he had no idea, right? And it was his job to facilitate, which was very interesting, but it's happening more often than you would think. But building those connections and having someone to go to with a question, Like, I have so many grantees and foreign trade zone employees that I can actually go to because I've met them in person. And they're asking questions for me, we're asking questions to them, right? So I think we need to work together in a time like this where no one really knows what's going on, and there's so many new faces with CBP enforcement, which is nuanced because there's less and less new faces in the international trade compliance space. But yeah, I think just being open to ask questions. I ask questions all the time to so many different people outside of my company because I've made those connections.
Nice.
Well, and that is something, again, I guess, in preparing people to step into any kind of a career. Quite frankly, the approach of what we're talking about would work in any industry. But to your point is that you can't come in with I've got the knowledge. See here, I've read the regulations, and now you're talking to somebody across the table, if you will, that has just been placed into a position. There's how many people have fallen into compliance because all of a sudden nobody was there. It's like, guess what? You're the last one here, and I need somebody to do compliance. You're it. And all of a sudden you're going, okay, what do I do? Well, there are people within CBP and the other agencies that they see an opportunity, they step in, they don't have that experience. So to your point, making it a win-win, you're asking questions, whatever. But if you develop those relationships, here's the other thing. I can remember, and Lalo, I know it's the same thing for you is having relationships where you have phone calls or emails and whatever, and you talk, you say, hey, you know what? I've come across this problem. Have you ever had that? Have you ever seen that? And it opens up a dialogue. They've called me and said, you know what? I'm thinking this is the way it goes. What about the private sector? How would that impact it? And some of it is, hey, here's exactly what happens. Or the other is, I don't know, but here is where we need to get the right people in this conversation. So it's called bird dogging is what I do. It's like you got an issue and you try and go through. But Madison, you're so right in that asking questions, going back and forth. It's not, and you're asking a question that's open ended. It's not a yes, no. So that's the other scenario. So it starts the dialogue. I think that's vitally important.
I think that with that nuance, you're going to have to start saying yes to situations that you're not exactly ready for. And I think that's honestly where I've propelled so much in the space already because I'm saying yes to every single opportunity. And even if I have no idea on a topic, the information is out there. There's people to ask questions. Just figure it out.
Exactly.
You can't
Yeah.
just be like, oh, I don't know. So you got to figure it out.
I heard, I don't know if it was a motivational speaker or coach or something. I heard someone one time said something about, the experience you get at the DMV. Everybody hates going to DMV. You're going to sit there for hours and you're going to get ignored and everything. And, when you go to and rate, if you go into like Google and you look at the ratings, they always have 1 star, it's really bad. This guy was saying how in order for you to get a 5-star experience, you need to be a 5-star customer. In other words, don't be that jerk. Don't be that you never ask the questions, you're just going and everything you're saying kind of resonates with me that way, Madison, in that you're the one asking the questions. You're creating your own 5-star experience because you are going out there and asking the right questions or being that curious person, that you're not just going to sit there and assume, well, you're the CBP officer, you take care of it, you tell me, you know what I mean? That's not the way it works. If you want to have a good experience with that CBP officer, help them along. I mean, it's not my job. Well, too bad. Yeah, it affects your job, so might as well help them, and that's what I took from that conversation. It was many, many years ago. I mean, I would say like a good 10, 12 years ago, and I've always thought of that. And when I approach situations and everything you're saying to me, it kind of resonates in a way, that way. And you've created yourself that 5-star experience, in your career. You're moving up along that way, which brings me to that next point. Off air, we were talking about your firm. It is a smaller firm, and some folks may consider it like a boutique firm because it's not like, like 40, 50 employees or anything like that. But you all had recently been notified that you have the most FTZ applications out there than any other third party, service provider. What do you feel? I mean, being as an employee of Blue Tiger, who has these many applications and have been helping so many clients, what have you learned from that? Why, number one, why do you have that many? And number two, what have you learned in that sense that why folks come to you? And of course, you've probably learned a lot about FTZs. Obviously, when you came into the business, you probably didn't think that was going to be a niche. Not that that's the only thing y'all do, but that was going to be like the biggest thing that y'all are doing. And then the obvious reason is, like Andy said earlier, a lot of folks are looking at FTZs so that they can leverage the duty savings and tariff savings if they're shipping or selling abroad once they bring it in. But anyway, just kind of curious, what 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 have you learned through all this experience going through that?
Yeah, so right when I started actually was when the foreign trade zones were really ramping up. We have a foreign trade zone specialist, and he's also a engineer, so he's fantastic with foreign trade zones. But we didn't, from my knowledge, we didn't do that many every year because they weren't that popular. But as the companies we're paying the IEEPA tariffs, right? We were trying to figure out how to mitigate the tariffs in other ways, and one of them was foreign trade zones. So for those of you who don't know, foreign trade zone, if you are importing and exporting parts, you can get a duty savings. By importing the parts, you're not paying the duty and therefore exporting your parts. So you're skipping that duty altogether. And then you also get your MPF savings with weekly entries. So instead of filing an entry every single week, you can file 52 entries instead. So there's lots of savings and potential with a foreign trade zone. And you get great compliance standing with CBP. So it helps in so many aspects. So I think that's why they became so popular. As for why we got so many, I'm not sure. I'll have to talk to Tom, our sales guy. He speaks at so many events, and he just teaches people about foreign trade zones, and he is able to articulate it in a way that people understand. And I think that is, like, once people understand it, like, oh, I need to talk to you.
You know what Tom does, and I do know who it's Tom Cook you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I do know Tom. Tom talks in common sense. He is so knowledgeable, but he breaks things down, and and he doesn't set himself up way up here. I mean, he comes down to everybody's level wherever they're at and talks in common sense. I think that right there, Madison, is something that it attracts people. I don't want to be talked down to if I'm looking for a firm for somebody to come in and tell me how screwed up my operation is or whatever it is. It's like, here's the opportunity. And that's his approach. Here's where, yes, you're doing some things. Here's an opportunity to increase your margins or streamline your process or reduce your cost.
No, I would completely agree. Yeah. No, and that is
Yeah.
definitely his philosophy. He even when he speaks, he's like, I like to be in the crowd. I like to actually be discussing with people and not up looking down on them. So you're exactly right. Yeah.
So what'd you learn, back to Lalo's question though, what have you learned in that process since coming over there and what you're going through here?
Gosh, so much. My entire year has been consumed by foreign trade zones. So I think that I've thoroughly learned the process. There's a lot of the technology piece in the transactions that are a bit complicated because there's so many nuances with every single company and how they manufacture products. And one very interesting thing that I've learned is with CBP. CBP is supposed to be, they all follow the same process, right? But every single port that we deal with, every single CBP officer is so different, and their process is so nuanced that like figuring out how to handle the officers and their process, every single one we get a checklist from them, and they're all vastly different. So I think that also helps us as we're able to pivot so quickly on what they want. We don't have just one streamlined process. We take the client and we really break down each, like, what do we need to do here for you and for the officer in the port, whatever
Well,
it
you
is.
also aren't you having to work with each FTZ board in that local region or area, and isn't that a
Yes.
challenge at times?
Yes.
I mean, you're
Very
dealing
much
with
a
people,
challenge.
let's
Yeah.
face it. everybody has their, some are on a board and they're like, well, I'm just on here more of as a figurehead kind of thing. And lo and behold, they actually have to understand some of these applications to push it forward to then for the Department of Commerce, isn't it? It's
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
going
and
over.
it's been interesting in the past, I would say 5 or 6 months, maybe less than that. We've seen a lot of pushback from the FTZ board for manufacturing and FTZs. Everything is slowed down. There's so much
Really?
pushback from them. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Why?
And
I
it's
wonder.
not it's not explicitly stated. We're just seeing it, and we're hearing that it's from the top down, right? They're being asked to slow it down. So it's gotten a much longer process because we're getting so much pushback, which navigating that is just something on top of it, but
Interesting.
we're figuring it out.
Well, hey, let me ask you real quick. We're gonna have to wrap up here pretty quick. But one of the things that I'm curious about, have you sought out anybody to be a mentor to you? Maybe it's your folks just naturally, and it's subconsciously it just happened, or have you made a point of having some key contacts that would be brutally honest with you to say, Madison, you're going down the wrong road, or, you can do better than that, or, hey, this isn't bad. Here's your next step, that kind of stuff.
No, that's a great question. Obviously, my parents I look up to them in every way, and they're so knowledgeable. But honestly, who I work for, Tom Cook and Kelly Raya, they have been the best mentors that I could ask for sure. They have put me in so many scenarios where I'm completely not ready and said, okay, well, you're going to figure it out and you're going to do it. And I think that's what's made me, again, move along so fast is I'm saying yes to everything, even though I'm not ready. Like the last speaking event that I did, I was a topic that I was not confident on and I was not ready for, but I was told you're going to do it. And I did say yes to it, but what I learned off of that, and now I can go and speak at a conference and I feel confident about it, is so huge. And I think that's so important in picking an employer, someone who's going to push you forward. And also I'm saying yes to everything too. So, last year I wrote an article. I'd never written an article before, just to get that's just extra layer outside of work that putting your name out there, getting more credibility. And also I'm learning so much too. So yeah, those would be my mentors. But you also have to have the discipline to do it yourself. You got to put yourself out there.
Like I said on LinkedIn, coming soon to Global Training Center, a course taught by Madison Lackey. So we'll give you that next layer of discomfort, So
To our listeners, obviously this has been a great conversation with Madison, and this is one of those things where this particular show should be something that you're sharing with your own kids or your peers or whatever. Is like, what are you doing to develop yourself? What are you doing to challenge yourself? But the other side of it, if you are in management or in upper management to middle management, what are you doing to push your staff into uncomfortable situations? I'm not talking about inappropriate, obviously. It's like pushing them beyond their skill levels so they can develop their skills. What are you doing to challenge them and move forward? This may be something that hopefully this conversation sparks some ideas on career development for your own team, because the other side of this, we keep mentioning it, there's a lot of people that are retiring and changing jobs or moving on to other things. The opportunities are there. Have you got a succession plan? So, or if you were to step out, who could step into your shoes? That would be a very appropriate thing, as well as helping your staff move on to maybe other promotions, could be in other companies or whatever, but just stop and think about this. You put your time and effort in. If somebody like a Madison is promoted and happens to go to a different company, your network now has expanded into another company. So that's one of the things. Networking is a very important thing in development. So sorry for a little sidestep there, but I'm hoping people will understand this is a show that you need to look at and hopefully challenge yourself and your staff and your kids.
we do need to wrap up, but Madison, thank you so much for joining us. And I know I'll catch up with you definitely at a conference here coming up.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. I think that honestly, my biggest advice is you got to put yourself out there. You have to be doing all the extra work outside of just your 9 to 5 job. And that's really the way that you're going to leverage yourself in this industry. And I wish that I could get so many more young professionals in this space because there's so much opportunity right now. And if you take it right now, especially with all this AI stuff, you're going to go so far if you get into it now.
Right.
Yeah, folks, look at on LinkedIn, reach out to us and connect, and you can send some messages that way. And if you're looking to, expand your own network and look at how to get into the industry and
Yeah, we'll
whatnot.
have Madison's LinkedIn on there so
Mhm.
you can message her or, just connect with her, but for sure. And, that way you can, if you want her perspective, one-on-one or whatever. I mean, hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot, but, I'm sure people will reach out, Madison.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you all.
All right, folks, have a great day, and like us, share us, and keep going on the Simply Trade podcast efforts. Thanks.
Thank you.